What is it really like to be a journalist in today's world and a new mom at the same time? In this episode of Well, That's Interesting, I sit with broadcast journalist Sarah Chandoo to talk about modern journalism, media literacy, misinformation, and the pressures inside the newsroom. We also dive into having a child in later life, dealing with societal expectations, and balancing career and motherhood. A conversation that's honest, relatable, and eye opening. If you've ever questioned the news you consume or the people behind it, this episode is for you. Let's get into it. So tonight I'm joined by Sarah Chandoo, a broadcast journalist living here in Trinidad and Tobago. And I've known her for many years. We actually went to University of the West Indies together, and we both pursued our degrees in communication studies. It was during one of those courses that I became aware of her, and only maybe because I was quite competitive in the classroom, and she emerged as one of the brightest in the entire course, right? So I'd like to welcome her to the podcast. She brings a wealth of experience being a media personality, and she is also, most recently, a new mom. So, hi, Sarah.
Thank you so much.
Tell us a little bit about being a new mom.
One thing I realized about my parents and their generation, my aunts and uncles, they had their kids young, early 20s. My cousins and I, though we were on the later side of things, they mostly had their kids late 20s, early 30s. I'm on the very end. I had my son when I was 40. In terms of experience, I mean, I did have something in terms of practice. I have two younger brothers. One is 9 years younger. The other is almost 19 years younger than I am. So with that younger brother in particular, I felt as if, I literally was able to help take care of him as a baby. And he was, I guess, sort of the first practice child. The other brother being 9 years younger, obviously I didn't have any sort of major responsibilities with him, but I was able to, take on a more involved role with my second brother. But the adjustment with my son, he was born in September last year. The last 5 months have been a journey. It's been tough at times. All babies are different, but with him, he had his own adjustment to go through. And, there were nights within the first 2 or 3 weeks because they get up so often. You have to get up with them. And even though I'm usually an insomniac, it's a different sort of tool. It's a different sort of experience, and it was challenging at the start, but you sort of fall into a routine with it. I think it's something that you definitely need to be prepared for mentally, especially because it does take a lot out of you as a parent, both mom and dad, because my husband was right there with me throughout that particular journey. I think even though he tried to take over when he could, so much falls on the mother in those first, I would say, 2 months, especially. I think the newborn phase actually lasts about 3 months, they consider it. But yeah, those 2 months are it's a bonding period. It's also a period that tests your resilience, I would say, in some regards.
You had your son at a late age, right?
I
Now,
did.
I I don't have kids, but family members, when I meet them or friends, would ask, when you're gonna have a baby? They'll ask my wife, when you're gonna have a baby? It irks a lot of couples when they
hmm
are asked that particular question. How did you deal with that? Or how did your husband also deal with those sort of queries?
Yeah, so I was 40 when I had my son. My husband is 1 year older than I am, so we are older parents. I would say generally, though, we were fortunate not to face that question constantly within our own family. My parents never put any pressure on us to have kids. his parents didn't do that either, as far as I know. But there were instances where, especially once you get married, they sort of expect that children will come soon after. But I mean, I could understand that question, getting to couples, because I mean, you never know what a person's journey would be, what their journey as a couple would be. So many are fighting hidden battles. You don't know if they're trying and they just aren't able. You don't know what is going on. And even if it is simply that they don't want to have kids, I realize, talking to other persons within the last year about having children, that everybody who has kids can't believe that other people don't want kids. And I think that's unfair, because having a child is a responsibility. It's not a responsibility that everybody wants. And it's something that people should be allowed to make a decision on their own, without everybody telling them, you should do this. It's going to be different when you have your own child. It's somebody else's life journey, you need to not put pressure on them to do something that they feel they may not be ready for. I mean, if they come around to making that decision on their own, then fine, because that's what I did. I
Hmm.
was certain up until a certain time that I didn't want to have kids. I
Hmm.
love children, but I always thought that it may not be my journey. But I mean, when I decided, my husband and I decided together, and we were fortunate enough that when we did make that decision, we didn't have to wait very long for our son, because I actually told the doctor I was very surprised that we were able to basically get him within a couple
Hmm.
months. I think people need to stop putting pressure on other people when they feel they're not ready to have children. It's their decision.
Yeah, it is. And it comes with a lot of complications at that age.
Hmm.
So that decision is not one to be taken lightly for a lot of women. How do you see your journey now? Do you do you see yourself as, ready to fulfill that role, to be that parent, to be that mom? Are you there yet? Has it sunk in as yet for you?
Yeah, so I mean, I would admit I was in a sort of daze when he was now born, because I would look at him and think to myself, he's here. And what am
Yeah,
I going to do?
yeah.
You know, because you're responsible for this little person now. And
Hmm.
I remember watching a video online from a pediatrician, and she
Hmm.
was jokingly saying that newborns um just they don't know what's good for them, and so many little things could go wrong. And it put a little bit of fear in me, because they're so sensitive at that age. You need to be fully responsible and fully aware. And
Hmm.
then I realized, what, people have been doing this for thousands of years. I think I'll be fine.
Yeah.
But it's a lot of emotion that plays off in terms of panic sometimes, worry about every little thing. There were days I would just stare and make sure I see the chest rising and falling, that he's breathing. And I didn't
Mm,
understand all the funny videos online until I actually had him physically present to realize what that is like. There are so many things you as a parent need to look out for. It's easy to get into your own head. I think being an older parent, I was very much able to prepare mentally and otherwise for him. So I think even though there was that adjustment period when he was actually born, I think I fully into the role and prepared for it. I mean, we were able to plan for him, but even babies who are a surprise,
mm,
I think, the parents, they just fall into the role as well, because
yeah.
especially for the mom, when she has 9 months to basically get adjusted to it. I think all parents have their own journey.
You've come into being a parent whilst also having one of the most time-consuming jobs on the planet. You're a broadcast journalist, and that means your time isn't yours.
Hmm.
For those who don't know what it's like to be a journalist, you don't have time for yourself because there is the news that needs to be covered when you're on your shift, and then there's also the news you need to be following when you're off your shift. So when you get on shift, you've not missed anything crucial. Tell us about being a broadcast journalist and being a new mom at the same time. Because I think those two worlds might collide.
Yes. So all newsrooms have fundamental differences in terms of, staffing and whatever else. So our particular newsroom is it's really small. And it means that while we do have quote unquote office hours, we basically always are on the lookout outside of those hours for anything major that might be happening because news doesn't have a time. News happens when it happens. So many things would have occurred overnight. For example, I remember the strikes on Iran. They happened, I can't remember what particular hour, but it was technically outside of what people would consider quote unquote regular hours in terms of work. So the thing about having a small newsroom as well is that you are kind of always semi on the job kind of thing. You're always on the lookout, even if you're not formally in the office. The good thing about technology is that we are able to work from anywhere even if we're not physically in the studio, we could still facilitate voice reports virtually. We have our website. We could post when we're out of the office. We have our social media platforms. We can share news there. But that level of accessibility in terms of our resources to get the news out means that you're never really off. You always basically have one toe in the news business at all times. And I mean, I've been fortunate enough to have a great support system. My in-laws are very, very involved in terms of helping with my son. Well, my mom lives away, but my family here, my brothers, they're also very involved. Sometimes they would, take him for walks and look after him while I try to do errands in between as well. Husband is also very hands-on. So I think all of that, the family support system, it really does come in handy to help my workload across the board, whether it's with the job or, home obligations. It really does come in handy. It really is true that, it takes a village to raise a child.
What is a normal day for you as a broadcast journalist at a local radio station? What is that like?
Let's take an ordinary work day. Sometimes my day could start as early as 5 a.m. That's the time our first shift starts. So it's getting up, getting our son ready. My husband is from South, so he actually takes him down to South every day. So on the days where I have to work in the morning, we'll just get him ready extra early. Make sure everything is packed for him, make sure everything is organized in terms of, baby bottles, clothes, whatever else. Then I'm dropped off to work and then he goes to South the day. It could be busy, sometimes not as much. It really depends on what's happening out there. That morning shift usually ends just after lunch, but depending on what's happening as well, I may stay later than that. And even when I come home, because I one of the more senior reporters in my office, I'm sort of basically on call for the afternoon to assist in any way that I could with the stuff that's being worked on. If by chance the shift is in the afternoon, my morning is spent doing chores because with a baby, you always have
Mhm.
something to do, even when he's headed somewhere else for someone to look after him. On those instances, my workday starts more like 10:30. It goes all the way until, well, these days it's at 6:30. Our final newscast is at 6:30, so it's a very late evening. And when I come home after that, it's to see about trivial things, making sure baby bottles are washed and sterilized, seeing about dinner, restocking his bag, because I always like to check the bag every night to make sure everything he needs is in there. Because sometimes my mother-in-law may take stuff out. I always tell her, take everything is inside there, take whatever you need. And I always just kind of restock everything to make sure that that bag is always prepared. And the most crucial thing in the evening is, especially when he comes home, is to try and spend some time with him because I mean he's gone for such a long portion of the day. It was really tough for me to go back out to work after maternity, actually. I remember crying and saying that he doesn't miss me as much as I miss him because he is such a well-adjusted baby. He's happy.
Yeah.
He's too friendly,
Yeah.
he goes by everybody. He does not fuss to stay with anybody. He if you take him up and you walk with him and he gets to go outside and see the trees and the birds and feel the breeze, he will be the happiest baby in the world. He likes to be outdoors.
Yeah.
And
That's nice.
he's never given any trouble to go to South when I went back out to work, which is a blessing, yes, but it was an adjustment for me because I missed him so much.
I mean, South is great. What's there not to like about South? I
I know,
mean,
I
come
know.
on. But you have so much to deal with on a daily basis, and you still need to be, I mean, focused, laser focused on your work and delivering the news in an unbiased and professional manner. And yet, there are people out there who have misconceptions about what journalists do and what they stand for and how they go about doing their jobs. What is one of the misconceptions people have about journalism or journalists in this country that irks you a little bit?
There are a couple of things actually. So one thing is that when people read a report that they don't like what it's saying, they automatically accuse that reporter or that media house of being biased in favor of a particular something. Now, I'm not saying bias doesn't exist, but there have been so many instances where there's no agenda on the part of the reporter, but they're accused of having an agenda simply because people don't like what the report says or what the report is putting out there. I mean, there's always room for improvement in any industry. I think our local media, obviously, we have things that we could work on to strengthen, but I would say that a lot of the media colleagues I've been fortunate to work with or see work, they are committed to their craft. They do try as much as possible to be as objective and as unbiased and as balanced as they possibly could, comprehensive as well. So that is one thing. Another thing is that so many people figure that news is easy, you know, um, especially when it comes to radio and television news. They feel as if presentation is the majority of the work. It isn't. It's literally the tip of the iceberg because we actually added a news person to our newsroom last year. And in the interview process, I would say I came across so many people who believe that, reading is the most important thing. And I had to explain, no, the critical aspects of our work include sourcing the news, verifying the news, writing the news. Presentation is the final thing that we do, and I would say it's not the most important thing. Obviously, it's important in terms of how we present it to the public, but that's probably 5% of the job. The vast majority of the job is very time consuming. Um, it's very frustrating at times, but it is the most important thing.
Yeah.
And yeah, I came across somebody who said, "Oh, they're so interested in news," and when they realized the amount of work that we have to do on a daily basis, especially in our newsroom because we multitask, they just couldn't couldn't deal with it.
So, in my experience, there are two types of people who come into a newsroom. There are those who come for the fame and the glamour, and then there are those who come and they are so excited. And I'll
Hmm.
tell you the level of excitement. I had a young reporter join our newsroom when I was back in my radio days. And on her first day, she completed her first day and she was on her way home and she calls me excitedly and she was like, Shane, I need to give you some information. I was like, okay, what's going on? There's an accident and a car hits a light pole and I think it should go on to I think it should go into the newscast. Okay, and I took the information knowing, a little fender bender when nobody got
Hmm.
damaged isn't gonna make headline news or anything of the sort. But I was so happy that she was that excited that she started having the eyes for
Hmm.
events, things happening around her to try and going so fast to call back and say, I think this should, something you should look into. And then there are those who come and, like you said, when they see what the work is and they need to put it in, they're like, oh no, I just want to be on air. I just want
Hmm.
people to see me, hear me. And I don't want to say it's hard to get them away from that mindset. And I have tried, but it's always good to come in with a grounded understanding of what it takes because it's a calling more
It
than
really
just a
is.
job. Yeah.
I've known so many people who started in media and would have eventually left to pursue public relations or any other type of job, because it really does take passion to stay in it for the long haul. Because I remember the new reporter when she started, I told her, say, you need to at times set boundaries in terms of what you're able to do. I said the enthusiasm because there was a lot of enthusiasm for the job itself, which was excellent. But at the same time, it's so easy to let it overwhelm everything else that you do that
Mm-hmm.
you need to have those boundaries. And also,
Mm-hmm.
I would have said that there are days when there is so much work and so much frustration. Maybe it's a day where things are just so rough in terms of working on a story and just not being able to get it,
Mm-hmm.
or the public is very vocal on social media and so on these days. Sometimes it may have a wave of whatever negative feedback for something that would also put a lot of mental pressure on a reporter. I say there are some days that will really test your patience. It will test your resolve for the job as well. But there are days as well that when you produce a story, a particular story, it's worth it. You feel a sense of fulfillment with the job as well. But it
Yeah,
really is at times a very up and down sort of feeling
it
being in
is.
media. Yeah.
Yeah. What's the most challenging story you've ever had to cover
Ooh,
emotionally?
right. So anything at all involving children is always difficult for me to work on and also to present on air. Even after almost 18 years of being on the job, it still gets to me because when you think of crimes against children in particular, and we've had some very heinous crimes being committed against children in this country, it takes you to a different place mentally because my first thought is always, what could a child have done to have an adult do this to them? You know, Children trust adults. They trust adults to look out for them, and that's such a massive breach of that trust. And I mean, there are too many examples of incidents that have occurred over the years during the time that I've been in media. There are so many that I would have remembered that preceded my days in media as well. And it still always puts a pit in the stomach thinking about it. Sometimes when you get information as a reporter on matters like that, you actually get details that you may not release to the public, and that's a difficult thing to deal with as well.
Hmm.
Some media houses do put it out. In terms of our newsroom, we consulted with some senior media people on newsroom code when it comes to reporting about children. That really heinous details we try not to release or to publish on all platforms. It really depends from story to story. To the point as well that we actually started adding little warnings with regard to certain content involving children. Sometimes they come with, we don't like to use the term trigger warning, but we put a please note this story contains references to, child sexual abuse or whatever it is, because it's such a difficult topic, not just for us to work on, but we recognize that it's also a difficult topic for people to read about.
Especially victims, former victims
Yes.
of child
Mm-hmm.
sexual abuse who have now come into adulthood
Yeah.
and maybe they've not worked through that trauma.
Mm-hmm.
And strangely enough, I was looking at a thread on Facebook tonight, and the question was asked, what was the earliest age you were sexually molested or assaulted? And women were dropping numbers
Mm-hmm.
below 10. And there were men in the comments who were very doubtful about it. But I'm not going to get too much into that. But it tells me that the prevalence of crimes against children and women do go unreported or underreported or underinvestigated, and they have to deal with that trauma by themselves. The media has a responsibility to bring those things to the light, but you always have to protect the victim and shield the victim
Mm-hmm.
from instances of victim shaming, which is such. a terrible thing that people do to victims.
Yeah. You see it
Yeah,
with a lot of these missing children
children.
reports,
Yeah,
especially when they are teenage girls.
yes,
Some of the comments below are really disgusting.
yes,
Even if it is that, some children do have let's be real, some children are a bit unruly, but they are still children, you know.
yes.
And there are instances of teenage girls being groomed as well. And in situations like that, you have to hold the adults accountable because children are children and they can be easily influenced a lot of the time. And I could tell you, it really gets to me as well. You mentioned there, when women come out and even girls and talk about their experiences, um, a lot of people like to say, "Oh, well, why didn't you do this or why didn't you do that?" Especially when it comes to non-adults. I'm talking teenagers, children, and so on. A lot of the times, it's a matter of fear. And those stories you hear about the vast majority, especially young girls, being exposed to or subjected to, that is actually true. I have a personal experience with that as well as a child, in terms of knowing about adults who are just inappropriate. Not saying anything physical happened, but so many adults are also inappropriate with children in terms of language and so on. Those sort of things we need to hold adults accountable for. And
Yeah.
far too often in this country, we don't. We really
Hmm.
don't.
So it's interesting what you were saying earlier about the missing teenage girls. And maybe that behavior is a manifestation of what they are going through, and
Mhm.
they're not able to express themselves because they probably don't know how, or they're probably scared. It's probably just a way for people to pay attention to them. And again, they don't know how to describe what has happened to them or what has been happening to them. And there are trends. So if you see a girl, a teenage girl running away from home, we're concerned about her safety, but we also need to look deeper and say, well, what's happening in
Hmm.
the home to make you want to run away? Let's give you the benefit of the doubt that you're not unruly. There must be something there that needs looking into a little more. So
Hmm.
it's very unfair when they do go online and they make all of these, I would come out and say stupid, really stupid, ignorant comments about what the child is doing without thinking for a moment that she may be going through something at home. And that brings me to my next question. Social media seems to be driving the way reporting is being done across the world. Like there seems to be a push from social media that then guides how the news is reported or what is being reported in the news. So the agenda of the day is being set by what's happening in social media. Do you agree with that?
So I think yes, definitely, because of the fact that news has always reflected what's happening in society, and social media has now opened up society to the point where anyone can express a view and anyone or anything can go viral. So something that may seem insignificant or people may not have even been made aware of can now reach thousands or even millions of persons. So social media is actually one of the platforms in which we may get tipped off as to what's going on, because let's say someone went to the hospital, they had a really bad experience. They take to social media to write about it. They were in the vicinity of an accident or a crime or something, they take a picture or video or something and they post it online. A lot of people are being made aware of that. We have so many school fights making it to social media as well. Some older, some very recent. So there was a former minister of education a good few years ago who would have said that, for example, incidents involving students or violence in schools, it's not increasing per se. It's just that social media has made us more aware of specific incidents. So it looks like if there's an increase. Social media is a platform, or it provides platforms, sorry, where anyone can highlight anything and draw attention to anything. So it's actually a pretty good way to get an idea of what's happening on the ground, and it really does influence news content now as well. to the point where politicians take to social media to share statements and personal opinions on whatever topics. So there are opposition members now, they use social media to disseminate their thoughts. So yeah, there are politicians, certain members of opposing parties and so on that take to social media to share statements.
You're talking about the news being generated on social media, which is lightning fast communication of information that reaches around the world in no time. But you're in the serious news business. Do you feel a constant pressure to be first, and how do you balance the speed with which you put news out? Because I would expect that social media pages are also vying for the attention of your audiences. How do you
Mhm.
balance that speed with accuracy in what is being reported?
So that really is one of the main challenges to media in general these days. So traditional media would have their process, which is don't just accept everything or any information that you get. You verify. If there are questions, you get those questions answered. You analyze. What does this mean? Could there be more to this? So there's a process, and you put more to the story a lot of the time, not all the times, because there are different types of stories as well. Some are very straightforward, but there are some persons and entities that they just take information and put it out there. And I mean, I think you would have noticed it as well. There are so many social media pages that publish news to the point where sometimes they get news directly from people who would have had an issue, had a certain experience, and they put it up directly. So they are very much competing with traditional media. I mean, the competition could be healthy in terms of it would prompt traditional media to maybe become more efficient, but at the same time, it has added a lot of doubt to people's minds regarding traditional media because a lot of people over the years would have built a distrust of traditional media, not just locally. I realize that with regard to international media houses, that's the case as well. There are some people out there, they don't trust BBC, they don't trust CNN, they don't trust these big name media houses. They would prefer to get their news from a particular source. Yeah, so I mean, social media has allowed other entities to rise up basically and challenge what traditional media does. And the onus is now on us to become more efficient and to gain that trust again, to show that what we do has merit. Because the thing is, not all persons who are posting news or news content online would go through the rigorous process of vetting details and that sort of thing. That's the danger with regard to some of the information that you do access, not just on social media, but also on online platforms.
You said something very interesting that people need to double check the information they're getting from social media, try to find out whether there are agendas behind it. You're essentially talking about having media literacy
Mm-hmm.
when engaging with content from online. What does that mean to you? And do you think it is the media's responsibility to inform people on how to consume media in general, or is it something that should be in the education system, or should people really take it upon themselves to be responsible when interacting with information they get online? Whose responsibility does media literacy really fall to?
Well, that's the thing, right? So it's not something that has ever been formalized to say, okay, well, we need to teach media literacy. It's always just something that was just bandied about in terms of an idea. Obviously, some people study it, but in terms of the general population and media literacy, it's not something that's been formalized for their benefit. And that's the thing, right? So there is a need for members of the public to become media literate so that they would be able to recognize legitimate news, legitimate information, and so on. I would say traditional media has not made that easy as well, because I mean, there have been instances and scandals, quote unquote, in the past where traditional media has been caught with its pants down, but uh that would have been to an extent, sometimes pressure from the public as well, forcing them to confront what they produce. And I mean, how do we enforce media literacy for the general population then? Imagine a traditional media house telling people this is what you should look for. It may seem as if they're trying to force people to accept what they are producing. So I think maybe traditional media is not the best entity to promote media literacy, but how do we do it then? That's actually a very good question.
Yeah, because it's necessary, and people don't know what they don't know. So if you're not aware of, there's a thing called media literacy out there where you can learn how to interact with media and sift through agendas, sift through um, semantics and packaging and framing and all of these things, then you won't know what to go look for to better enable yourself to be a better consumer of media. So there's that aspect that people don't know that it exists as something that they can learn or train themselves in. And then again, like you said, like who is really the best entity to really teach people this basic skill? Like it should be alongside literacy in general. It should be something that is taught at a very young age to children because we have been hearing that, you know, children are being influenced
Mhm.
in certain ways, like the kind of content they're consuming from very young is changing their attention spans. It's, they're having a lot of developmental issues because of their consumption of social media. So it's a big issue, and I don't know who's going to take the reins on it. How do you, as a journalist, go about ensuring that you remain unbiased in your reporting, that you deliver the facts, that you give your audience the truth at the end of the day?
Most journalists consider themselves to be objective and completely unbiased. But the thing is, bias could exist in the most mundane ways, you know? So something as simple as you just generally gravitate towards a certain idea or a certain concept or a certain ethical stance, and it may influence how you report, yeah, ever so slightly. So the thing about it is that, especially when it comes to certain topics, you need to look at what is being said and just be as laser focused on the facts as you could possibly be and
Mm,
present that to the public and let the public
mhm,
interpret that to an extent in terms of what the situation may mean. You can't force people to take the opinion that you want to give them. You know,
mm,
you need to have not have an opinion reflected in your story. And I mean, some things we take for granted sometimes is how we word things as well. So being in radio, I was always taught be as simple as you can when scripting your stories because this is not a format where a person could read the story and if they misinterpret a sentence, they could go back and read it or whatever, you know. And television, they do have the visual aspect to an extent, but in radio, your voice is the only thing that they are taking in. And if you aren't clear and precise with your script, and they miss something or they get confused, you can't risk losing or having your audience member not understand what you said. So I was always taught from the get-go, write as simply as possible. And I think that is such a crucial part of bringing across the facts alone, because when you try to bandy about too much with, complex writing and so on for radio, you may inadvertently add certain emotion to stories, if that makes any sense. But you also need to be aware of the words that you use when you are scripting your story. So, I mean, I think I was reading something very recently about how international media was covering the situation in Gaza. And there was a very distinct difference between the language being used by BBC News as well as the language being used by Al Jazeera. In this case, there was an accusation that it was a deliberate choice, but it made me even more aware of just how important language is when you are scripting your news, and how easily we can carry across emotions in terms of how we choose to write a sentence. So we may be thinking, oh, this sentence is factual, it's subjective, but you may actually be adding the tiniest amount of emotion as well. So you need to be even aware of that to an extent.
I was listening to a report a couple years ago when Russia had invaded Ukraine, and international media had been reporting about developments in Kiev. Kiev being the capital city of Ukraine. However, Ukrainian reporters were pushing back on the use of the word Kiev and asking that people use the word Kiev, which is their pronunciation of the
Hmm.
word. And it makes sense that something as simple as the pronunciation of a word could sort of delegitimize a country's power or hold on that word. Because if you take the Western pronunciation, Kiev, then, well, to Ukrainians, they are losing what makes them Ukrainians. Their capital city is being renamed. And to them, that's sort of some sort of emotional and psychological warfare. That's what they were thinking of it as. Call us the proper name, or you're making us feel like we're losing even our identity. So there's so much to be wary of as a journalist if you really want to be as unbiased. And I'm pretty sure that a lot of journalists here in Trinidad say Kiev. That's what
Yep.
we're hearing Western media say. And I don't hear Kiev again, unless it's probably in Europe. You get a European reporter, you're getting a report straight out of Ukraine, you don't hear Kiev. And that's the correct, proper pronunciation of
Mhm.
that word.
Did you notice that it's happening as well with regard to Turkey? So I'm saying Turkey for years.
Mm,
Turkey, in terms of the spelling Turkey, was always used as well. But
yeah.
I've noticed that international media, they now carry the term Turkey
Yeah.
with the proper spelling and so
Spelling.
on. Yeah.
Yeah.
So I mean, when you think about it, so many countries, we know them by their westernized name, but they do
Exactly.
have their own particular names. For example, Germany, they call themselves Deutschland,
Yeah.
and I don't think there's been any fuss in Germany in terms of being called Germany. But
Hmm.
I know in countries where Western culture is seen as suffocating, that they are
Mm,
trying to reclaim heritage.
yeah. Talking about heritage, you work at 103 FM. How has that experience been for you? How did you, adjust stepping into that environment from early on? And what sort of changes have you seen in yourself working there?
I know a lot of people think I am, but I'm not actually Hindu. I'm Roman Catholic. So stepping into 103, I did actually, however, go to Hindu primary school, Hindu secondary school, and so on. I grew up in a community that's primarily Hindu, and I do have a lot of Hindu family as well. So 103 does have programming for different religions. For example, right now we have a mix of programming for both Ramadan and for Lent, depending on any particular Hindu religious occasion. That's why we do have programming for that. So it's always catered to all. It made the experience seem familiar in terms of I felt as if it's an environment that was not strange to me, but also there was so much room for me to learn more about East Indian culture. I learned so many things that I did not know before being at 103.1 FM. And it's still a learning experience for me as well, even now. They do mix in a little non-East Indian music of late. That's primarily at the demand of the listening public, but it stayed true to its founding genres over the years. It was founded in 1993, actually. It's a very small radio station. I think the announcers possibly are the largest section of employees. We have small departments, and it really does seem like a family. On any given day, we would just make a chow, or sometimes somebody would bring stuff and they would cook something in the office. Now we could cook in the office. When I started, we were in long circular mall where we were not allowed open flames in the building. So, I mean, they've tried ever since 1993 to foster a sort of family environment, and it really has stayed generally like that, despite, staffing changes over the years and so on. But I think it really is a fun place to work because you do have a lot of understanding because you tend to be so close to your coworkers. The people really are the best thing about working there.
What skills have you learned over the years as a broadcast journalist? Because, correct me if I'm wrong, you're more of a multimedia journalist now, and you've had to take on different roles in order to sufficiently man the newsroom and all that is required of you all right now.
Yes. So, I mean, media was something I did want to get into, but stepping into an actual newsroom, I was one of those who learned just how much work it was by being on the job. But I basically, you asked what skills I would have learned. I would have learned everything because my degree at UWI was communication studies, yes, but it was not media specific. So I learned everything from the basics of writing a story, how to go about putting together a story, verifying information, learning to do interviews, presenting. Presenting was definitely not my strong point when I started. I heard my demo a few years after I started, and I listened to that, and honestly, it was terrible. And I have come a very, very long way from that. We all start somewhere. Some people may have done broadcast courses where they are more proficient in presentation. I think presentation was probably the thing I had to work hardest at because I was never the person to go up and present and talk in front of large crowds or anything like that. I mean, I would have done it for assignments and so on at university, but it wasn't my strong point per se. And so, I mean, I was fortunate enough to have started with the basic principles and the basic work of working in media when I started on 103. And after a few years there, then we started to have the rise of social media to what it is now. So it was a progression. So it's not like I came into the newsroom and there was all of this to learn. And so as the years went by, we just added duties along the way. So social media came on board. We had websites coming on board. We learned to be multimedia journalists along the way as well. And I actually couldn't ask for a better transition because it allowed me to learn at a certain pace as well. The newer person starting on in our newsroom, they are hit with everything one time in terms of learning about radio journalism and journalism in general, and also multimedia content and how to manage content on the social media. It's just a lot to take in now. But I did learn all that as well. I also learned photography, basic videography, video editing, and so on. I could do a little bit of everything. And that comes from working in a smaller newsroom. So other media houses would have departments to handle social media, to handle video editing, and so on. We at in our newsroom, we do everything.
Guys, I know Sarah Chandoo from our university days. We did communication studies together, and we would have also gotten into media at the same time. She was at 103, I was at Heritage, and gone through our media careers. I left that life and I went off into corporate communications. But I did not know, and I was pleasantly surprised when I found out later on. And it's just by chance sending Lord of the Rings and Star Wars reels to her on Instagram that I realized, hey, she's a fan of these things as well. So how did you get involved in Star Wars and Lord of the Rings? Like, what's that origin story there for you?
So with Star Wars, I actually don't know. I think it's just something I've always kind of been aware of and just always watched. I kind of gravitate towards the fantasy genres. I don't know why. I distinctly remember the point at which I was interested in Lord of the Rings too. So I was one of those who read the books first and was excited when the movies came along. I was actually visiting my aunt in Philadelphia and I was reading the newspapers and there was a breakdown of the cast for the first Lord of the Rings movie, The Fellowship of the Ring. And I was reading these little character biography things and it was so interesting to me. And I told myself, I have to see this movie when it comes out. And then I learned that it was based on a book. And I got a hold of the book and I read the books. And I mean, there was no turning back from that. And The Hobbit as well. I have the set, all three. I mean, there's other works by Tolkien as well. So a newspaper article triggered my interest in Lord of the Rings and my greater interest in Tolkien as well. I think he's fascinating as an author to learn just how he came to write both The Hobbit and Lord of the Rings is fascinating to me as well. And to learn the background to it as well, his experience in World War One. Writers are the real talent, to have that sort of imagination and to put it down on paper and create this world. I think Lord of the Rings is probably the best book series there is.
Yeah, and to write it in a time when the world was at, well, he wrote it after the war,
Mhm.
but to write it all on paper, like no computers. Maybe he had a typewriter, but I'm pretty sure he sat he sat in an English meadow somewhere and he imagined himself in Hobbiton and he wrote pencil to paper, pen to paper, and he wrote everything of his legendarium. And I was so impressed with the his ability to capture the English language and to write so fluently and so beautifully. And I try. I mean, I'm not going to write about English fantasy things. So I try to write about our folklore and, you know, eh, try to highlight the things that I've heard in terms of the the legends and the stories that we have here in the Caribbean and in Trinidad and Tobago. I have a long way to go with it, but you did say that, the authors are the real talent. What about Star Wars? How did you get involved in the Star Wars fandom?
Yeah, so I just, like I said, I always just was aware of Star Wars. I can't pinpoint where the interest actually started. I've just always been aware of characters like R2D2, Chewbacca,
Mm-hmm.
Han Solo. And
Mm-hmm.
I think, actually, I think I may have gotten, so this is going to, I mean, we've already established I'm over 40, right? So I
Mm-hmm.
remember going to UE, there was a video club that was on the corner where I would sometimes wait for a taxi to head to campus. And sometimes I would, depending on, like if it's a Friday, I would pick up some movies, have them for the weekend and so on. And I think once I saw the original trilogy for Star Wars, so I decided to get them to watch all one after the next.
Yeah.
But I was already aware of the characters, and but I hadn't actually seen the movies at that particular point. I had
Mm-hmm.
seen Spaceballs before I saw Star Wars. So I yeah.
That's funny.
So I was just, I don't know, it just took me down that road. And then I know there was the other trilogy that came out that was completely eviscerated by the fandom. I didn't think it was that bad. And now
Yeah.
it's appreciated to an extent. Hayden Christensen, that
Yeah.
man has so much resilience. He was torn apart
Yeah.
and now he is appreciated by the fandom. I think if it's one thing I don't like, I think the Star Wars fandom is it's very critical.
Mm-hmm.
I know the most recent trilogy, there's so many negative words that have been said about it, but I personally enjoyed it, I don't mind it too much.
Yeah.
But I'm not that sort of hardcore fan. that
Yeah.
I think exists out there. But I
Yeah.
mean, sometimes you need to let people enjoy what they enjoy, you know? I
Thank you.
understand they want a certain standard or they expect certain things. George Lucas did a fantastic job in creating that universe that I think they probably just wanted to remain on a certain
Mhm.
level. I think The Mandalorian is probably the best of the most recent material produced. I watched Andor as well. I haven't
Mhm.
seen season 2 of Andor yet.
Mhm.
I have to get it to watch it, but I watched Andor.
Mhm.
I love The Mandalorian. I know a lot of people like Baby Yoda. I do as well,
Mhm.
Grogu, but my favorite character is The Mandalorian himself.
So I think my introduction to Star Wars, it may have been because of media hype. They would have flooded the space with
Hmm.
Star Wars promotions and advertisements. And I'm trying to remember which one. Was it Pepsi or Coca-Cola? They ran a promo. They ran a promotion. I think that's how
Somehow
I
Pepsi
became.
is coming to mind. It seems like a very Pepsi thing.
Yeah.
I could be
So
wrong.
so
Yeah.
one of them, I can't remember which one, but it was one of those drinks, those popular drinks. And I'm like, what is this? It looks interesting. What is this character? Who are you? And the movies would have come out simultaneously, and I would have been very young. I would have gone to see the movies and just sitting there, just like mind blown that this thing exists. And then as the years went by, I actually started reading the books because I'm like, oh, they're novels. They're like novels in between, the movies, or they're novels after the movies. And as I got older, I started consuming more and more Star Wars content. And I think it's great to have just a Star Wars story told. I
Yeah.
don't, yeah, I'm not a purist. I don't want it to be at the level of George Lucas.
Yeah.
J.J. Abrams did his best with the most recent trilogy. And I loved what they did with The Mandalorian. I also love the Book of Boba Fett. And Andor is just, I mean, superb. And then they came with Obi-Wan, and I thought that was great as well. And they brought back
Yes.
Christian, and the man is so dedicated to his craft. Like I just think let us enjoy stories about
Hmm.
these fantasy universes, whether
Yes.
it's in Star Wars, whether it's in Lord of the Rings, and people love to hate on Rings of Power, but let us
I
enjoy a
know.
story.
Uh-huh.
Just let us enjoy it.
Did you see by chance the war that went on IMDb recently?
I did not. I try to stay away from the
So,
most toxic parts of the fandom.
right. So it's not with any of the franchises we've been talking about yet.
Okay.
So there was there was a series that came out recently. It's called A Night of the Seven Kingdoms. It is
Yes.
actually within the Game of Thrones universe. So it's
Mm-hmm.
set, so there's House of the Dragon
Mm-hmm.
that has had 2 seasons, I think, so far.
Yeah.
And there's Game of Thrones. A Night of the Seven Kingdoms is set closer to the events of Game of Thrones,
Yeah.
but in between the events of both of those stories, right? So there are Targaryens. It's about Sir Duncan the Tall.
Mm-hmm.
And that series, I think there's only been 6 episodes, and they're shorter, they're more along the comedic lines, but there are reminders in between that this is a Game of Thrones show, right? Some of the sequences remind you this is in a particular universe.
Yeah.
So that series has come across very well for the public. There's been a lot of praise for it. The episodes have been doing very well on IMDb, and there was a particular episode. I think the rating on it on IMDb was near perfect. So there are disputes as to where the feud originated. The one I've heard the most often is that fans of Breaking Bad were upset that A Night of the Seven Kingdoms at this particular episode had a 9.9 rating, that they
Mm.
started to downvote that episode to get the rating to drop. And apparently, fans within the Game of Thrones universe, and apparently fans from other fandoms as well, got upset that these Breaking Bad fans are so ridiculous that they started to downvote an episode called Ozymandias, which is or was recently, until very recently, a 10 out of 10 perfect rating on IMDb. And they got that episode rating to drop to like 9.7 or something. So there was just a downvoting war, and the comments on IMDb was basically along the lines of the fandoms saying straight out that they are doing it for their fandom. And it was ridiculous because obviously it takes nothing away from the quality of the shows, right?
Thank you. Thank
The
you.
Breaking Bad
If
episodes are still good. The night of the it's just fans just trying to just I don't know. It seems so ridiculous to me as well.
it is, because is it going to change the fact that people are going to like something or they're not going to like it? You don't create content expecting everybody to like it or expecting everybody to appreciate
Hmm.
it. Every bit of content has its niche, and
Hmm.
we can carve out niches and let us live in our own little worlds and find our own comforts in the things that we like. But to up and have cross niche conflict just seems very, very toxic
Yeah, you're
and
downvoting an
over.
episode you never saw. That's ridiculous.
Exactly, like, I don't know, it turns people away. I think it turns people away, and it unfortunately puts a lot of pressure on the producers, the showrunners,
Yes.
to try to match people's expectations. But you have to be very grounded in knowing the direction of your story or the show that you're running, to stay clear of those distractions and
Hmm.
continue down the path that your story would take you. But R Rings of Power was, and I think it's mainly because Amazon was doing it. Like, people
Yeah.
hate on Amazon, and rightfully so. But it was still, at the end of the day, for me, it was good to see the works of Tolkien on the screen. And I think
Yeah.
that's the important thing. So people have problems with, the hunt for Gollum and the fact that Viggo Mortensen is not going to be Aragorn. But yeah, Aragorn hunting for Gollum, he has to be younger
People
than what
need
he
to
was.
give actors a chance, you know. For
Yes.
example, nobody wanted to give Heath Ledger a chance as Joker.
Hmm.
There was so much criticism of it
Yeah.
to be an iconic role for him. And I think most recently, I remember saying it. So we had a segment on 103 where we chit chat about entertainment news and so on when they cast Robert Pattinson as Batman.
Hmm.
I remember saving a particular meme with Lego Batman in a shiny outfit, and they were like, "Oh, this is when Batman meets Twilight, right?" And there was so much criticism, because he was still seen as the vampire from Twilight.
He's still a
Um,
bat.
there was so much criticism for his casting in, let's face it, Batman is an iconic superhero, right? And I remember saying on air, we need to not judge this casting. We need to let it come out, and then we can have the feedback on it. Just don't say Robert Pattinson would make a good Batman just because of the work he has done before. And the Batman turned out to be one of the, the best movies of that particular year. There was a lot
Yeah.
of critical acclaim for it, and he did a
Mm.
very good job in the role. I
Yeah.
remember watching that Batman several times, the movie. And I think they're working on a sequel, right? So
Mm.
clearly he did something right. And I think Robert Pattinson has done his work as well in terms of breaking out of the Twilight typecast. But I mean, it goes to show, just let something come out, don't judge it. Let new actors take roles. You can't expect the
Yes.
same actor to be playing the same role all the time.
Yes. And it would be great if people understand that actors bring their own takes on a character.
Hmm.
Some directors give them that creative license. Do what you will with the character, which is what Heath Ledger did with the Joker. He is
Yep.
the most iconic and close to perfect Joker. He's not that comedic or cartoonish Joker. No, Jack Nicholson played a great Joker, but it was too comedic for my liking. I think Heath Ledger brought the edginess of Joker, that psychotic persona to the character, and I'm glad Christopher Nolan let him do that and just take the
Mhm.
character and run with it in that particular way. And you know, we're so caught up in the way things should be, and because it's been like this forever, that we're not willing to open our minds to see things. Maybe it'll work in a different way. And the fandoms, they're all purists to some extent. They don't give it a chance. And it
Yeah.
ruins people's appetite for the content at some point. And I think it's just very sad that that happens across the board. Because you can think about, why can't we have a black James Bond? James Bond is just a name. He's just 007. It's just
Yep.
a name they give to him. He is not the same man from 1960 something. He can't be that old, right? James Bond. It's just his code name.
Is it
Why
true
can't
that
we?
James Bond is based on Christopher Lee?
Yeah,
I heard that somewhere. Yeah.
yeah, it is. It is true. He was, because Christopher Lee was part of British intelligence services, and during the, I think, during the war or after the war, and it was based on largely his life.
Hmm.
And I think when when you have iconic characters like that, like a James Bond character being so iconic, and he has always been a white man,
Yeah, I
it's
understand. Yeah.
it's gonna be hard for people to say, you know what, Idris Elba could never be a good James Bond. And I would love to see Idris Elba try the role, or give it to somebody new, fresh, give it a different angle, give it a different take.
Yeah, I mean, I love the fact that a lot of the fan castings have put forward Idris Elba as an
Yeah.
option for James Bond. I would also love to see I mean, the fans do love to cast actors in whatever role they think they may be suited for, but to also bring up a very much unknown actor who would just absolutely make a name on the role, you know?
Yeah,
Um,
definitely.
because there are so many actors out there. They just need the opportunity to build something, you know?
Mm,
While it's good to be established and to have those established names sometimes, I love to see
mm,
new actors in particular roles and to see what they could do as well. Because sometimes, I mean, when you see too much of the same actor all over, it kind of it sometimes turns me off from watching movies.
yeah.
So I've never been like a Tom Cruise fan, but I love him in certain roles. I
Oh,
think he's definitely memorable in Tropic Thunder. That's one of my all-time favorite movies.
right.
I'm not a Brad Pitt fan. I haven't watched any of his movies except for Inglourious Basterds.
You've never
And
seen
even
any of
then,
the Ocean's movies?
nope, nope, I
Wow.
haven't. I remember him from a very small role in 12 Years a Slave as well. I know of Interview with a Vampire, but I've never seen it. What any other iconic Brad Pitt role? I mean, I watched Friends. He was in that Friends episode, but yeah, I'm not because I feel as if he was so hyped up that it kind of that's just me though. Kind of took me out of watching movies that he's been in, but I mean, he is a very good actor, and I think he was impeccable in Inglourious Basterds as well. But I love to see new actors that people don't really know anything about coming up in certain roles. For example, the entire Game of Thrones cast. The only actors I would have been familiar with would have been Mark Addy and Sean Bean, because Sean Bean, of course, was in Lord of the Rings. Mark Addy was in a show that I had liked from long ago called Still Standing, and he was also in A Knight's Tale with Heath Ledger, actually. So they were the two actors I was familiar with. I didn't really know anybody else from the show. And those are the two actors that didn't really have long stints on Game of Thrones either. I mean, no spoilers, but they didn't make it very far, you know?
Like, I don't think, I don't
They
think
didn't make it very far.
I don't think I think we could give spoilers for Game of Thrones because
Yeah.
of the way it ended ultimately. I was looking at a video recently about the creation of Independence Day. That's that movie with Will Smith in it. And
Mhm.
apparently because Will was still acting in Fresh Prince of Bel-Air, the studios did not want him to take the role of Stephen Hiller because they thought he was too comedic. Like this young comedy style guy from a sitcom coming into a big
Yeah.
screen action movie. Like they didn't want him. But the director was like, no, I want him because I think he's gonna do a great job. And
Yeah.
they gave him the opportunity, and that skyrocketed Will Smith's career into action movies. So you need to give people a chance, see what they
Yeah.
can do, let the audiences decide, and just let actors be. I always say that. Like they
Yeah.
need
So by the
they
time
need
they try to pigeonhole actors.
yeah. But okay, on that point, can you imagine Keanu Reeves in a romantic movie?
Wasn't he in one?
Lake House or something, or Glass House or something of the sort. But I don't know, like I can't really see him doing it. Except for the romantic interest he had with Trinity in The Matrix, I don't really see him doing it. You know? That being said, like I just made a case to give actors more opportunities, and I'm saying this about Keanu, but
Uh-huh.
that's just how I feel about Keanu Reeves. Like, give us all the action you could, guy. Just give us all the action. You know?
Yeah. I mean, I think some actors they would want to try their hands at different things.
Yeah. Mhm.
Um, I re the case in point, I think so there's been a criticism that Adam Sandler plays the same character in every movie. Then I saw him in Uncut Gems,
Mm,
which was an excellent movie. But I still love Adam Sandler movies. I love the character that he normally plays, which really is almost exactly the same thing in every single movie.
do you realize this guy has been so consistent over the years? This
Yes.
guy, like I was looking at Grown Ups 1 and 2 the other day, and I'm like, he has consistently made funny movies.
Yeah, they
And
are genuinely hilarious.
yeah, it helps too when you own the production studio doing it. Because Happy Madison, I
50
think, is
First Dates. 50 First
51st.
Dates is an excellent movie.
It is, but
Yeah.
he owns Happy. I think it's Happy
Yeah.
Madison is the
I
name
think
of
so, yeah.
the production company. So it helps when you have the money and the means. But he has always been consistent. He has always been creating movies. They just come out of the blue. There's no need for a
Uh-huh.
hype over them. You see an Adam Sandler movie, and you're gonna go into it expecting to just have a good time. And he has
Yeah.
never tried to change that formula. And every single
Mhm.
movie, he always has his friends in there. They're always somebody from like one of those 90s movies, always in there. Yeah, but no, like there's a really fun conversation we're having. So I definitely want to have you back so we can talk more movies and
Yeah.
TV, Sarah. But I want to wrap up with you just telling me, tell people what they really should expect of journalists, like what they should really take away from, understanding what journalists go through and what they do and how they serve their country, being the fourth arm of the state. Or if you could
So,
explain that part to the listeners, yeah.
so journalists are trained to get facts, to verify facts, and to present them to you, um, in a way that makes a difference to you. With technically everything is newsworthy. So we try to sort through everything to bring stories that we think are relevant to you and your life. And there is a lot of work that goes on in the background in terms of ensuring that the particular details are correct. That is there anything unanswered that we could add to it to make it not just more relevant, but also to clear up any doubts or any misconceptions or anything. A lot goes into a one-page story or in the case of radio, a story that may only take about 30 seconds to a minute to read. So much work goes into that little product that all we want to do is to bring you relevant news that could impact your life in a positive way most times, but at least to just at the very basic level to keep you informed so that you know what's going on, not just in the country, but around the world as well. That is our our most basic goal, to keep you informed about things that are happening and to keep you informed about things that you care about as well. But I mean, at the end of the day, it's not an easy job as well. And it is easy to criticize sometimes, but keep in mind that we do this job for you, the public. It really is as simple as that.
Thank you so much for being here with us tonight, Sarah Chandoo, and we will definitely have you back. With your permission, I would leave your um, IG handle in the description section so people can follow you and follow your journey as a
Oh,
journalist. Yeah. So
yeah.
guys, that's it for well, that's interesting, and we're the podcast that keeps you informed about the people who keep you informed and what they're up to, right? So until yeah, silly little joke there. So yeah, that's it. So thanks, Sarah. It was
You're
nice. We'll do
welcome.
this again. Take care.
No
Bye.
problem.
Hey guys, if something in this conversation made you pause, question, or see things a little differently, then I think it did its job. Thanks for spending this time with us on Well, That's Interesting. New conversations drop regularly, so follow the podcast wherever you're listening and come back again when curiosity pulls you in. Until next time, take care, stay frosty. Bye.